Hello, I am Bentham and welcome back to Factorio Town. So in the previous episode we chose the name for the nuclear town. It is now known as Radsmith, and at the moment we aren't quite ready to start work on the nuclear reactor yet because we haven't finished the nuclear power research. Until then we can't construct any centrifuges or any other components of the nuclear stuff. So we'll just carry on mining the material for now and we'll get back to it when the research is finished. So I'll hop over to Redport and clear away a couple of the assemblers because the ratios have changed and now it doesn't make sense to have one wire assembler to 7 red circuit assemblers. It's now 6 instead. Previously it was 8, but I went for 7 because reasons. I think at the time I wasn't quite sure of how the ratio worked and thought that there might be a bit of a shortage of copper wire if I went for a full 8. But anyway, it's fixed now. It's 1 to 6, so that is all good. I could change the construction a little bit to make it a bit more compact, but at the moment that's too much effort. I can't be bothered. Let's go do something else. So I built a couple of walls. We've now got some stone spare from making the nameplate that we can use to quickly fill in the gap in Redport, and there's a little bit left over that we can use to make some more wall in Radsmith itself, because of course we do need to set up some defenses for it. There is a danger that biters could get here. At the moment it seems that there's no particular danger from the east because all the biters are just attacking Redport. In fact, they're attacking it quite a lot right now. But there is a small chance that they could come in from the west. We have had, for example, attacks on Colbury, which you wouldn't really expect considering where it is, but occasionally biters will end up just going straight in between, like Fortin and Julborough, and if they do that, there is a danger that they could attack the that new town. So I've added in some walls and some defenses, as much as I can really, to make sure that if that happens, there is something to stop them. But we're out of stone again, so I go back to West Point to grab even more. We resupplied on raw stone after dumping what we had available in West Point, so I can immediately put that into the chest and then grab whatever stone brick is currently here. Not that much of it really, and at first it seemed really confusing. It seemed like there just wasn't as much stone brick coming out from the stone that I'd put in as you'd expect. But what I didn't realize is that as well as the fact that it takes 2 raw stone to make a stone brick, it also is the case that raw stone is in stacks of 50 and stone bricks are in stacks of 100. So 4 stacks of raw stone turn into 1 stack of stone bricks, and so that explains why more than a wooden chest worth of stone ended up being like 5 stacks of stone brick and nothing more. So after grabbing that, I grab a bunch more raw stone, once again resupplying, this time grabbing everything that is available in this particular outpost. I try and get a round number just because it's always nicer to have that, but I do consider going to visit the other stone mining area we have as well to get even more available, but we'll leave that for now. We hop up to Newton, where there have been a couple of attacks recently. The biters are once again advancing. That's the thing, you leave them for one episode and the next episode you sort of have to deal with them, or you start end up being in serious trouble. Though I think in the end I don't deal with them this episode, which is perhaps not advisable. I noticed that they're creeping across to try and get to the southwest desert again. They just really love that place. They'll just happily ignore the towns and just start colonizing over to the desert just because it's some open space that they can make use of. It seems like. I'm not sure if that's how it works or not, but it's what it looks like to me. I mean, they are also sending attacks up at the towns, of course, as we've seen in Newton. And we're also getting a lot of attacks on Frackham from the east, Forgedale from the east. That's the only reason that the pressure's been taken off Newton from the east, is because Forgedale is now in the way, and the biters are attacking that instead. Also, checking the pollution, it's getting really quite bad. We've been adding in a couple of different things recently that have sort of accelerated it a lot. We're not up to the stage of sort of putting efficiency modules into all of our assemblers and stuff. Even though Julborough is now operational and we are making modules, I don't think I'm going to do it this time. I think I may have said that at the start of the series, but I think I went a little bit overkill with Railworld, putting efficiency in literally everything, and so this time I decided to go with steam and with not efficiency, so that there would actually be some pollution and the biters would be bothered. But now we've ended up changing that anyway. We've gone to nuclear power. We will still have a bunch of pollution from machines using energy, but we won't get very much from the nuclear power. I don't think it generates much pollution whatsoever. I'm wondering if in future there might be the addition of some ground pollution. That was something I think the developers were considering. I forget what their final decision was on that, but at the moment it seems like there are very little downsides to using nuclear power, and that might come to change in the future. There might be options for it. I think it'd be interesting to have a difficulty setting where nuclear nuclear power could become extremely dangerous with like the potential of exploding, but after seeing how much work it takes to set up a reactor, it's probably better if it's not made a default setting that reactors can explode. Make it a high difficulty thing, because that can really ruin your day if that ends up happening. And there's all sorts of problems that can cause it. Just disconnecting a power pole, like basically if it explodes because of unused power, or like just a buildup of heat or whatever, then accidentally disconnecting a power pole for a couple of seconds could trigger like a meltdown process or whatever, which could be pretty crazy. Anyway, what I've decided to do for today is overhaul Frackham. It's about time we did. It's been the limiting factor in most of our production for quite a while now. Blue science is limited by the production of advanced circuits, which is massively limited by the supply of plastic, which in turn is limited by the number of pump jacks we have. So I've immediately added in 5 extra pump jacks, because we had added in 1 before, but it had no real effect. We still weren't generating enough oil to run the 3 refineries we had, and those 3 refineries are still not that many, really. We could do with more, so I'm just going to expand pretty much every aspect of oil production, and we're also going to have to expand the walls of Frackham by quite a bit. I am expecting that this is going to become one of the largest, if not the largest towns in towns, because I didn't want to split up oil production. I just wanted to keep it in one place. There's not really any clear point to split it at, apart from potentially having it that once oil had been refined, it was then carted off to a different town to actually be processed into plastic and sulfur and all that sort of thing. But it's not a good place to. There's no good place to split oil production, and even if there was, I can't be bothered carting like a bunch of different kinds of oil around, even with fluid wagons in place now. I think I'd rather just have Frackham be one of the biggest towns and just deal with all things oil. Also, I've set things up so that there's very little need for piping in oil from elsewhere. When I was setting up the settings for towns, I made it so that all the oil settings were really high relative to everything else, and so we ended up with one giant oil deposit that we've still barely made a dent in with Frackham. I've not even bothered building pump jacks on most of it so far, and it's been enough to keep things provided until recently. So yeah, I basically set it up so that we wouldn't need to go anywhere else for oil. There may be a certain point where we will have to go to another location for oil, but there are plenty nearby. Literally, there's one over in Colbury. I can just pipe that in. That barely even needs a train. I probably will use a train if I do, just because Colbury will be sad otherwise. It's going to be out of a job soon once the nuclear reactor's up and running and up to a decent speed. There'll be no need for steam power anymore, pretty much. I mean, Colbury might even end up merging into Frackham, depending on how we arrange things, because now you need steam for coal liquefaction. So it could end up sort of repurposing in that way, finding a way to sort of join in on the industry boom that Frackham will be having, and become involved in oil production in that way. But it'll be supplying oil as well, so it's like it's got all the different oil options. It can make steam for the coal liquefaction, or it can just provide crude oil. It will still need, of course, oil being delivered in, but that'll keep Southbridge in a job, though I am planning on making Southbridge be basically the unloading station for ore at, well, not for ore, for plates at Chipton, and then the current Chipton station will entirely be for outgoing circuits to try and take a little bit of pressure off the junction and the station there. I mean, I have applied some chain signals to fix it, but the more trains you have, the more chance there is of there being some sort of issue, unless I add even more chain signals to just everything. And then trains are queuing like 5 miles away to wait for their particular spots to be open. I mean, they're queuing 5 miles away because they have to, so anyway. Well, that's something to work out when we get to the time. Still, like, this is our first real look at throughput in the factories, in the county as a whole. So far, I've occasionally, like, set up a town to produce at a particular rate, but I've never been that bothered about fixing major bottlenecks. But I've decided, basically, I wanted nuclear power research to be done quicker, and while I was waiting for it, I didn't have much to do, so I'm like, well, I guess I'll speed it up. That's always the way, that's how Factorio works. It's, if you're waiting for something to be done, then you're not playing the game right. You need to make it so that the thing is done quicker, and by the time you're done with speeding it up, the thing will probably be done. You should always have something to do, and if you're not doing something, then why not? Because there's, like, you should never be waiting. There's always something you can do to reduce the waiting. And it solves it in 2 ways at once, of reducing the time it takes and also keeping you occupied in the meantime. So yeah, what I'm currently doing is, because I'm rearranging the walls, I'm extending the range, the covered area of the flamethrower turrets, just extending them to cover the whole of the new east wall. We're extending it up to make room for the cracking plants and things we've got. We are basically expanding the walls on 3 of the 4 sides we've got. We're expanding it north because of cracking plants and extra storage tanks, because always nice to have some extra storage tanks in case we end up producing more than we need. Then we'll have a good backup supply in case we ever have a slowdown of supply or a sudden need for a huge burst in a supply or whatever. We're extending to the west because we need more room for an extra 2 refineries that I put in, and also a little bit more room for pump jacks on the oil deposits, and we're extending south to make more room for oil deposits there. And this will continue into the future. There will be a couple of more times, I think, where I overhaul things and make more space, because I've only made enough space to contain what we've expanded to, and there's definitely going to be more reason for expansion in the future. Thing is, now I've got to work out how to fit in this particular oil deposit down at the bottom here. All the others are out of the way, but one of them is in the middle of the road, and that's a little bit awkward. I mean, the road was sort of a bit of a failure in the end. I started building all this road infrastructure around the county and putting flooring in all the towns, and then suddenly and sharply I ran out of stone entirely, and since then I've just basically made nameplates and walls and nothing else out of stone. I do actually have the command ready. Someone posted it in the comments of a Towns episode ages back, and I've got it written down, ready to just stick it in and use it one episode, but I've not got round to it yet. There's always something to do, and it's not yet become a major crisis. We still have some supply of stone, so I've just been getting on with what we have and leaving it at that. But at some point, probably once the nuclear reactors are done, and once I've had the overhaul of the trains as well, I think, then I will have, I think, the time to just plonk down a sudden stone deposit and build a town around it. It's good because I can pick the spot. I can find a nice empty area that was just going to be barren otherwise, and I can put the deposit there so that we'll have sudden booming stone industry in that particular area. And in fact, you already have the name plan for it and the name plan for another town. So there is going to, so far I've always put every town name to a vote, but there are 2 particular towns where I've already decided what the names are going to be just because I like how it works out. So unfortunately you won't get a choice there, but you will get 2 towns be built in the same episode probably, so that'll be pretty cool. So I spot that there's this radar here in the way of the wall, and I realize that if I move it over just a couple of tiles, it gives us slightly better radar coverage. Previously we had a small hole in our radar coverage, and by shifting it along a bit we have filled that in. I mean, we've made a hole somewhere else, but it was in a more convenient spot. That is the issue with having all the towns just have a radar in them and then not really have any radars anywhere else, is that you end up with very patchy radar coverage. And now that we can use the radars to look at the entire map, it's really good to have full radar coverage. So I'm trying to sort of fix that bit by bit, filling in gaps, and I need to start going around the big open areas between towns and just plonking a radar down in the middle of it with some solar panels, or maybe just hooked up to the nearest town or whatever, so we can have some proper coverage, and also get radars running along the edges of the defensive walls so we can get a better look at how the walls are doing, because we don't have logistics coverage or anything, so we are getting things damaged that we need to be keeping an eye on. Also, I keep forgetting to deconstruct that little extra branch of Julbra at the moment, the place that we were mining the copper ore from. At the moment, it's just sat there, just being attacked and being in an awkward spot. I should really just deconstruct that, and then it'll attack Julbra itself. Now, as I was constructing these turrets here, something went wrong. I've really confused myself here, because I've mentioned before how I space the turrets, so there's a gap of 6 between each one, or sometimes 2 if it's a particularly heavily assaulted area. So you'd expect the gap in, well, if I design things deliberately, then the walls would be multiples of 2 along, basically. And on the east side of Frackham, that is the case. I've got turrets lined all the way along it, and it's all lined up perfectly. And I've just made a wall of the exact same length on the west, and the turrets didn't line up. There was, it was off by 1. I don't know what I've done there. I'm guessing at some point I misjudged when I was placing and got it wrong, but it really messed with my head for a minute. I was trying to work out what on earth was going on, but I cleaned it up a bit and it should be fine. I mean, nothing's going to be attacking the west wall. There's barely any point in putting turrets there, but you just know that if you don't, the biters will suddenly turn up there. They'll build a base in the middle of the county and start attacking all the towns from the inside or something. I mean, if we leave them too long, they will start trying to do that sort of thing. I will need to deal with them pretty sharpish, but I just want to be able to nuke them. We've got nuclear power research now, but it'll take a while yet before we can actually make nukes. They require all the science packs apart from space science, so they're still a long way off, unfortunately. We can't start nuking them quite yet, but we can carry on setting them on fire, and we can see about making, like, destructor drones or whatever. Something like that. But anyway, the work is pretty much done now on Frackham. We've expanded things quite a bit. We've added in 10 new pump jacks, 2 new refineries, a whole bunch of new cracking plants, and I've also set up a proper cracking plant limiting system, because it's always a good idea to have it so that you have a wire-based system that limits the way that oil is sort of spread out, because previously I just had as many cracking plants hooked up as I liked, and if I really needed to reduce the cracking rate, I'd shut some down. If I needed to increase it, I'd build more. But now what I've done is I've set up some pumps, as I've been doing in all my saves recently, well, for quite a while at this stage, where they have wires connecting to the tanks for like light oil and heavy oil, and then it will only pump heavy oil into the cracking system if there is more heavy oil than light oil, and then the same thing for light oil and petroleum gas, to make sure that basically you have equal amounts of the 3 oil fractions at any one time. So, it's always a good way of doing it, and that works pretty well. Here I'm trying to make these roads work properly again, because I've got this stupid oil deposit that sticks out into it. I ended up having the wall go flush with the road, but then just stick out where the oil deposit is, which is ugly. But one day that oil deposit will be depleted, and then we can fix the wall. And I could, if I wanted to, just move the road around. I mean, the only reason the road's still there is because when I abandoned building the roads, I didn't bother deconstructing the ones I already had, because they were still sort of convenient. Sort of a bit of a mess now, really. But once we've got the stone situation sorted, once we've got a stone town made, and we actually have a supply of concrete and things like that, I will go around and just overhaul all the flooring stuff. I'll get all of the towns properly floored. I'll get the rails properly surrounded by stone. I'll build roads around everywhere. It'll probably be like a full 1 or 2 episodes dedicated to just going around making things look pretty, because I've really missed having stone. I like stone. I still regret to this day. I mean, I mention it pretty much every episode, but I still regret not accounting for the fact that flooring had just been introduced to Factorio, and suddenly we want a bunch more stone than we usually did. So I'm like, oh, nobody uses stone. I'll just have it like on the minimum settings. Why would I need stone? I'm not going to make a stone town. Why would you need a stone town? Oh, how stupid I was. But anyway, we have now finished the nuclear power research. In fact, while we were working on Frackham, we nearly finished the next research. In fact, I think we did. We started working on braking force and a couple of other things, and we're blasting through those fairly quick because they don't use very much in the way of blue science. And of course, we've boosted the blue science rate quite significantly. I've doubled the number of chemical plants making plastic, and that has had an effect. There are now a lot more blue science flasks being made, which is fantastic. We got a lot more research done, and now we're almost completely out of science that uses blue science packs. So, oops. We'll have to work on some more of them. We'll have to make some military science packs, and I think I'll make a special town for that. Current plan of action is to make a town that makes all sorts of miscellaneous military stuff. So, turrets, explosives, mines, that sort of thing. Just all the little military things that you forget about. And then it will also, as a side thing, make military science packs, because why not? It'll have pretty much everything there. The only thing it'll be missing is actual ammo. Armor-piercing ammo, but we'll have that brought in from Fortin, because whatever that military town will be, it'll be on a defensive line. It'll have a wall attached to it, because that's always a good way to do it. And so it will have a supply of ammo to use to make the military science packs. And then from there, we'll make a separate town for the purple science and a separate one for the yellow science, and that should all be good. And once we've got that, we'll be able to get all the research done. We'll be able to make nukes and finally kill all the bices again. Though by the time we get to nukes, we'll probably have defensive walls in all 4 corners and won't have an issue anymore. So, I mean, it'll still be nice. It'll still be nice to finally have revenge and just go out there and just nuke them like crazy. Once we have enough in the way of uranium available. Of course, that is still to be sorted out, but I am now sorting out the construction. I've gone over to West Point to grab a bunch more in the way of stone, because we need a bunch of that, and we also need a bunch of concrete to make a lot of the nuclear stuff. So we'll need a whole bunch of centrifuges so that we can refine all the uranium ore, and at the moment I'm just making a small reactor. We'll just start with one, and we'll go from there, see what we need. Towns doesn't use that much power, really. Even though it doesn't have any efficiency modules, I wouldn't be surprised if it uses less than than rail worlds, just because it's not about throughput. It's just about getting things done and having the trains and stuff. So we've not really gone heavy on the throughput yet, so the power consumption, I imagine, is fairly low. We've got by on not much in the way of steam engines so far, though I have noticed that at the moment we don't have enough power. You may have noticed that every machine I've moused over, the bar has been yellow. We're just, we're wavering between 80 and 90% power satisfaction, I think. And never quite getting up to 100. And it's... The Frackham upgrades are to blame. I finally sped up production, and it's had a knock-on effect for the rest of the county, and so the steam power isn't enough anymore. But next episode we will set up the nuclear reactor. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for today, but we do have enough time to get pretty much everything made. So I'm making the centrifuges there. I'm having to wait for all the concrete to be made so I can carry on with everything, but I'm trying to get as much as I can from that. I've made the reactor, I've made the heat exchangers, I think I've even made the steam turbines there, and so what we need are a couple of heat pipes and to actually build the thing and to get the centrifuges actually refining the uranium. That's going to be the difficult bit because it takes ages to actually get like a single piece of uranium-235, but as soon as that's gone, we'll immediately start having nuclear power. Because you get 10 fuel from one of those. One fuel is required to get the reactor just up to speed, but from there, all the ones after that will be providing energy, and we'll be doing so at a nice constant rate that should rival what we're generating in terms of steam power. So that's something to look forward to. Next episode, nuclear power. With that, I shall say goodbye. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.